Hi everybody, I'm Jennifer Tryon and welcome to your sun hat class. These sun hats are so cute and reversible, and what's even better is they sew up really quickly. You're going to be making a ton of these. Once we do it once together, I know you'll be off making sun hats for every gal you know. Now, the first thing you need to do is cut out your paper pattern. And we've included either a small, medium, or medium large size pattern. In my experience, you want to go with the medium large size, that the small one is best for kids. If you already know you have a particularly large head, maybe give yourself a 1/4 inch around the entire pattern just for a little bit of extra room. And if you want a particularly large brim, on the brim piece you can extend it a 1/4 inch or an inch if you'd like to make it a little bit larger. Just make sure you don't extend the middle part right here, because that's the part that's going around your head and it needs to fit perfectly against the crown pieces. So be careful if you're going rogue. If I were you, I would make the first one in the intended size and then see how it goes. Everybody on the HomeMade team tried it on, including my kids. My youngest daughter was able to fit best in the small medium, and everybody else, including my oldest daughter, fit the medium large size no problem. So that's about how far it comes out once you've got it on. If you like it particularly floppy and bigger, like I said, just extend that brim. Oh, they're so cute. Okay, first things first, we need to cut out our pattern pieces. Do not use your fabric scissors. And I'm just cutting a little on the other side of the black line. For a hat especially, I want to err a little on the larger than the smaller size. You'll notice on the circle on the top of the hat, there's these 3 notches. That's where your seams are going to line up, just in case you didn't notice that those were there. So you should have your 3 pieces that look like this. And in your kit, you've got 2 pieces of beautiful cotton fabric, and you've got some fusible stabilizer. You also got some white thread in your kit. We're going to use this cotton white thread on the top and in the bobbin, so you can also make sure you have a freshly wound bobbin. So what I'm going to do at the ironing board is set my fabrics aside for now. I'm going to save us a big step here by ironing both pieces of my fabric to the width of the stabilizer. This is just a bit of a time-saving trick, which, hey, we're all about that. So first off, this is a fusible stabilizer, which means one side is fairly soft and the other side has these little like rough bumps on it. That's the adhesive. So we're going to put it with the soft side down, the adhesive side up, and then we're going to take one of our fabrics and lay it right across. It will fit right across the top, and the other one's going to go right across the other side. I've got my iron on high, and I'm going to just fuse this right to that stabilizer. If we didn't put a stabilizer on this fabric, it would be so floppy, it would be almost unbearable to wear. And because we're ironing the stabilizer to both sides of that fabric, it's going to be extra stable. And even still, it's a floppy sun hat. So if you like a really, really stiff hat, then you'll be looking for a hard, stiff stabilizer that's fusible. This is a medium weight one. I find it's just a little bit more comfortable to wear. Now, test that you've gotten all the corners ironed down by lifting up and, oh, see, right here, not quite fused yet. And I used to say hot, dry iron, but I find with this stabilizer, it actually does really well with a little bit of steam. Remember, you can always stop and pause the video, finish up what you're doing, and then restart it again. Okay, I'm going to do another little lift test. Okay, it seems to be holding down there. A little bit more here. If your stabilizer is showing through, like it is right here, try not to touch your iron with it, because the glue will just get onto your iron and then inevitably will get on your fabric. It will wipe off. Like when it's really hot, you could take a a scrap and wipe it off, or wipe it on the side of your ironing board, but it will gunk up your ironing board, so I'd use a scrap. Okay. So now I'm gonna shimmy my fabric up and iron on my next piece. Don't overlap. You want there to be a little gap here, that's fine, because we want all the fabric to have stabilizer on it. See, I started in the middle, and I'm gonna work my way to either side. That helps get rid of the air bubbles. Don't over iron it either, because you can burn the glue right off and then it won't stick at all. Okay, all right, it's all ironed on. So now where we left that gap, I'm just gonna gather it up, bring it back to my work table. Now we've got our two pieces of fabric ironed together on our stabilizer, and I'm gonna leave them like this, and I'm gonna cut everything out at the same time, just as a time saver. The only piece that has sort of extra instructions is the brim, and you need to place this one on the fold, and you need to cut 3. So let's start there since it's the most complicated. All right, I'm gonna put my fabric this way. I'm just gonna flip it up so I've got a fold exposed here. And I'm gonna be placing, see where it says place on fold? You're gonna place it on the fold. Just be careful that you're catching all of the edges and the stabilizer. Don't put it right on the edge, because you might have some that it's not catching there. So just make sure you've got all of the fabric and stabilizer underneath and butt that right up against the fold. And I'm just gonna take a pin for my pin dish. You could use a fabric weight. I find the fabric weight a little bit more difficult because this is small. So I'm just gonna pin it in place. You could also use a pencil or disappearing ink and draw it on, up to you. I'm just gonna put a pin here and cut it out. Okay, that's just scrap. And then you can take your pins out, and you're gonna do this 3 times. Okay, there's another 2 pieces. So we can't quite fit it on the edge here. Instead, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna unfold this, and we need 3 of these kind of skinnier pieces for the crown. So I'm gonna go ahead and make the most use of my fabric and cut out 1 of the 3 crown pieces that I need. And then that way, when I'm moving my way up the fabric, I can make another fold. This is why it's great to follow the videos, because I discovered with this measurement of fabric, this is how you can cut it out and make the best use of it. Okay. And then we can do 1 more right on top. And you can always peel off the stabilizer if you wanted to use this for quilting or making like a little something scrappy, a little pouch, whatever it is, and you don't need the stabilizer, you can just peel it back off. Now we can go back to making another fold. We just need 1 more fold piece. I've got 3 of these and 3 of these, and now I just need 1 of the crown. So with the rest of your fabric, and if you have a piece of fabric that it's in, like for this side, for example, it doesn't really matter where I put it, but for this side, if I wanted to capture and completely center that flower, that could be an idea. Or you wanted to make it like half and half, that's an idea. You could always just fold your pattern in half and line it up if you wanted to try to get, fold it in half again. So we've got a crosshair here. And then this way we could line it up perfectly here. And then pin it down. And if it's not perfect on the top of your head, I mean, no one's really gonna notice. But if that's important to you, take a minute and line it up. Otherwise, just cut out the circle now. And don't worry if your cutting's not totally perfect, like Cricut perfect, because it's gonna be in the seam allowance. There's no edges showing, so. And so you can see cutting those, and look at that, It's nicely centered in the middle there, so you can make use of that flower on the top of our head. Now, if any of your stabilizer came a little loose, or you've got some pieces where you're like, oh, look, it's kind of coming apart here, just touch it with the iron again so that everything's nice and secure. Okay, so I'm just gonna pile up my pieces here with their like buddies. So I'm gonna start with the curved pieces. And we're gonna take one and another one. And what we're trying to do is make a big circle here like this, like the brim of the hat. So we need to go right sides together like this. And then we're gonna sew along here. And you can pin if you like, or if you're confident, you can just bring it over to your machine lined up, that's fine too. Or if you have sewing clips, clips are always good. And I'm putting the 1/4 inch foot on my machine here. I'm gonna sew a 1/4 inch on all of these seams. So if you have a 1/4 inch foot, that's gonna work great. If you don't have a 1/4 inch foot, you could check for the 1/4 inch line on your machine, or you can measure over to make sure your needle is going down a 1/4 inch from the edge of your fabric. So I'm sewing on the Skyline S9 from Janome, and I'm just scrolling over to the quilting section and choosing that 1/4 inch stitch, then I know it's perfectly lined up. And because this is not a quilt, it's a hat, I don't need the tiny, tiny little piecing length stitches of 1.8 that the machine automatically puts it at. So I'm just going to increase my stitch length up to 2.4. And you can see it's telling me to put on the O foot. I've got it on there, so we're good to go. Okay, so I've got it threaded with the white, and I've got the same white thread in the bobbin, and I'm just gonna bring my right sides together and sew that 1/4 inch seam right down that edge. And don't forget to back stitch. And if you're noticing it's coming a little unaligned, just line it up with your fingers and kind of hold it on the way in so it stays nice and lined up, and back stitch. We've got a piece that looks like this now, big letter C. And then we're gonna bring that together with our next piece. Again, right sides together. And bring it over to our machine, back stitch. It is important that you maintain that 1/4 inch seam because it's all affecting the fit of the hat. All right, so now this one's right sides together, and we'll close up this circle. You'll probably find it easier not to even bother pinning. Just roll those seams up with between your thumb and your forefinger, and then bring it over. Back stitch. I usually go forward 3 and then back 3. Okay. All right, there's one done. I'm gonna set this on my ironing board because we do need to press these seams open. You could start doing that with your finger, or if you've got a little seam roller. Okay, let's do the same with the other fabric. Okay, right sides together. Back stitch, and sew. Next one, right sides together on the one, doesn't matter which side. And again, right sides together. And I'm not worried about the patterns matching up or anything like that. It's gonna look beautiful. Okay, there's another one. See, I told you this sewed up so fast. You're gonna be done these in no time. Okay, we're going to do exactly the same process this time with the crown. So I'll take this one, and again, we are making a sort of circle here. So there's a short edge and a long edge. And so let's make sure they're aligned. We're putting right sides together like the long edges here. And then right sides together. And again, same thing. 1/4 inch seam, back stitch. And so it'll kind of look like it's starting to take some shape here. We'll bring the next one in. Again, right sides together. I'm a little off. I'm just going to scoot that top fabric over, hold it with my finger. Try to be as even as I can. And then these two meet up. So we're closing the circle here. So now you have a piece that kind of looks like this. It's going to round out when we bring it to the hat. So we'll set it aside for now because we'll have to press open the seams, and we'll do the next one. So make sure we're always putting the short sides together. Okay, and then the next one, back stitch, there we go. And then again, you've got a kind of a strip that looks like it's kind of angling, and then right sides together. And you might notice some variation in how you cut each piece. I'm noticing that a little bit. Don't sweat it. Just line it up best you can. Okay. So I'm just going to press these seams open. You can use a little seam roller if you've got one. Fingers are good too. It's just going to make it easier when I do bring it to the iron. You definitely want your seams laying flat here because you don't want a big lump inside your hat. Okay, so just take these to the iron and just press down those seams. A little bit of steam. And it is a little awkward ironing these pieces. You kind of have to find your way to making it flat because of the circle that you've sewn. But just get your iron in there, however you can. Okay, the seams are all pressed open. Now the pinning begins. And the more you pin, the more accurate you'll be. The less chance you'll have a fold over on your hat. So let's start with our one fabric and our other fabric, and they're inside out. Right sides together are going to be touching, and it doesn't matter where because they're all the same. So if we're bringing the right side of the crown seam, I'm holding that between my thumb and my forefinger, and I'm holding the brim between my thumb and my forefinger, and I'm bringing those seams together so that the seams are lined right up, just like this. And then I'm going to put a pin directly down through the two seams. So it's going, make sure it's going through both middles. And then that seam's going to be in line. And now let's do the next seam. So just shimmy our way over. It's going to feel awkward and floppy. It's okay. So again, I'm pinching that seam and bringing them together because that at least is stable while the rest is flopping around. Bring those two together and then pinch them with one hand while you bring over the pin and right through the center of that seam. Now find the next one, shimmy your way over, grab it, make sure nothing gets twisted, and those two seams together. It's normal that this feels like a floppy mess. It's okay. So now what we're going to do is pinch the two seams that are pinned and kind of pull it apart. And let's try to find a center point here and pin. And then let's try to find the center of that. Like, so we're splitting these in half and in half. It's basically to try to smooth out any unevenness. Okay, not enough pins. Let's find the middles again. The more you pin this, the more accurate your hat will be in terms of sewing this circle together. Just continuing to find the middle. And I'm just kind of raking it up with my fingernails, kind of like so that it comes up. Lots of squeezing with your thumb and your pointer finger. So now I've got a pin, like it's totally pinned in this section. The pins are about an inch apart. That's probably good. And now let's go to the next section. And let's find the two seams, pinch and pull apart. Don't like stretch, but like find the middle. And pin. And you're just going to do the same thing that you just did on that other section. Find the middle again. And you may feel where one side feels a little bit bigger or more fabric than the other. We're just going to kind of stretch it out a little bit and find the middles so that any of that discrepancy kind of gets spread out over the circumference. This is the kind of project where you're going along and you're like, I'm running out of my good pins. And if there's a part where you're like, nope, this obviously looks like a little wavy, put a few more pins and just try to spread the inconsistency out. Okay, so now it's pinned all around the circumference. And now depending on how many pins you have, you may want to go ahead and do the next side. Or you can go ahead and sew this side, and that way you can reuse those pins. So I'm still using my exact same 1/4 inch seam allowance with my 1/4 inch foot. So I'm going to bring this over. And for me, well, there's a couple ways you can do this. You could remove your free arm and put your hat right in the free arm like that so that it's a little more controlled because it's a circle. And if your sewing machine has this, then you may as well use it. Otherwise, you could just bring it up, I'd say facing up, so you have a little bit more of a sight line and you can sew it regular. But I'm going to go ahead and put it in the free arm. It doesn't really matter where you start, but I'm just going to start at just after one of the seams. So I'm pulling out 2 pins and go slow to start because we've got a lot of pins to pull out here. So if you have speed, turn it down and start sewing slow, a little slower, Jen. Back stitch. Pull out your pin, keep going. And if you sew this slower, you won't have to stop to pull out the pins. So even though it's kind of like, come on, let's get this show on the road, slower is better. And I'm going to kind of adjust and kind of not pull down like I'm yanking. You don't want to have dips, but just pulling down and softening out the wrinkle so that I've got a flat edge on my seam like here. This is sort of puffing up because it wants to flop like the brim will, but we do want to have a flat seam and no wrinkle. Instead of pulling this way towards you, pull to the left, pull down away from the hat, not towards you. That way the wrinkles kind of flatten down and go out and get spread out through the brim rather than making a fold on your seam. And if your fabric pulls away a little bit from your edge, don't sweat it too much. As long as it's in the seam allowance, it's okay. We still want it to be as flush as possible, but given that we're kind of guiding the fabric, away from the seam down towards the left here, there's gonna be a tendency for that fabric to want to come away, but try to keep it as flush here as possible. And just keep doing that as you make your way around the circumference. What we really don't want is like a tidal wave of wrinkles coming towards us, and in the end we end up with a big fold we have to sew over somehow. We want to spread the inconsistencies out around the hat, which is why it's so important you keep flattening this out as you go. Every little wrinkle. Otherwise you'll end up with an inch, I'm guessing, of fabric at the end. It's all kind of bunched up. Because see, if I didn't flatten this out, it would all want to come this way. And then I'd end up with a wrinkle here, see? And then I'd have a fold, a little pleat in my hat. We don't want that. We want it to lay flat like this. Even if it's just flat along that 1/4 inch, that's fine. It can all fan out in the brim. So we're almost to the end. See, the seam line is here. And we want to make sure when we get there that it's laying flat like this and not a big lump of fabric. See how it's wanting to wrinkle right there? So we'll just tuck that down. And then line up our seams and backstitch. I'm going to backstitch right over that seam. Okay. All right, we've got the makings of a hat. And it's okay, it's not necessarily meant to lay perfectly flat at this point. We've still got lots of work to do on it. Because in essence, it's gonna kind of prop up a little bit. So don't sweat it if it's feeling a little like, you know, floppy and wavy here. We're gonna get it all pressed down and sewn together. Okay, so you're gonna do exactly the same step with the inside. So again, take your seams, and I won't go through all of this again. You can rewind the other part to watch, because it's exactly the same process. Pinch your seams and start finding your middles and pin, pin, pin. Okay, so I finished pinning and sewing around what will be my, let's just call it my interior. So now we need to attach the top of the hats. Now, there's no saying you can't mix and match fabrics. In fact, there's no saying going forward in the future you couldn't make this a scrappy version of a sun hat and cut each piece out of a different fabric. That would look totally cute. But for now, we're gonna stick with our light colorways, and we're gonna go, again, turn it inside out. And remember, our pattern had those tick marks on it. So you can take a pen or a little pin and just put in where the tick marks are, because that's where your seam should be lining up. And then when I bring it to my hat piece, I'm going to take that pin and line it up with my seam, right sides together. And then I'm going to take that pin out and put it right through the center of the seam, and then turn it over. There's the pin, find the seam, and line up the stitch line with the pin, pull the pin out, and put that pin right through that stitch line and through both sides, and the other side. The pin lines up with the stitch line. Make sure the fabrics are flush, like right here. In it goes. Again, it might feel like, oh, it's not totally lining up. So that's all right. It's okay if it concaves in here a little bit, because we want to make room for like the crown of our head. So now, same deal. Let's find the middle, pull it out, kind of punch it down a little bit, and find the middle. And let the and let the circular part kind of come up the edge. So all the extra fabric is sort of going down into the hat there, where your head will be. And pin this best you can, just airing towards the extra fabric going down into the hat. And I would probably use pins here instead of clips, just because it's kind of small and a little finicky. There's lots of pinching going on, lots of pinching together. Now, if you end up with a little space like this, feels like there's a little more fabric on the outside than there is in the middle here. So I'm gonna kind of try to spread it apart so that I have at least one flat edge and smooth that down. We don't want to sew a wrinkle into the seam. And if it means you have to take out a pin next door and so that it can kind of smooth out over a larger surface, do that. But you want to make sure you're not sewing a wrinkle into your hat. And if you start just pinning all the way around instead of finding your middles, you'll end up with a big chunk of fabric that likely doesn't match up at the one side. So try to find your middle. Okay, once you've got it pinned, and you're happy there's no like real gaps, you can go and sew it from the top on the side, or you can go this way, whichever way you think put the needier side up. So for me, the needier side is the crown going this way. So I'm gonna put the top of the hat facing down and sew it this way, because this is the side that needs the most flattening out. So get it under there, just like we did with the other side. Again, shimmying down. We don't wanna sew in any wrinkles. So go slow and then back stitch. Pull your pin out. And now if you see a wrinkle is about to get sewn, stop, leave your needle down, put your presser foot up, just straighten it out. Your whole finger can get under there. Don't sew yet, but flatten it down. There, now it's going in flat. Pull out your pin. Now don't let a wrinkle get in there. Flatten it out. It just has to stay flat for 1/4 inch. The rest can all fan out, it's fine. If by chance you get the odd little micro wrinkle in there, especially if this is your first one, don't sweat it too much. It's a bit of a workout for your hands, this project. All right, so we're coming up on the end here. Bring it right over top of that seam. And then back stitch once you get a little ways over it. Okay, now you have an actual hat, but it's all stabilizer on the inside. So give it a try on. You can give a little test. Okay, it's a good fit. No problems, not giving you a headache. So set it aside, and you're gonna do exactly the same thing with your second piece. Remember, find the middles, lots of pins, and you can rewind if you want to watch me do it again. So before you pin it, remember, use the marks on your pattern. Do your little pin, and then bring that to your hat. And again, exactly like we did before, we're lining up the pin with the seams, finding our middles, and flattening out our sewing as we go. Just pause and you can take it back to the beginning of when I sewed that one if you want to see me pin the whole thing again and sew the whole thing again, but you're just going to do exactly what you did before. All right, I'll meet you back when it's done. All right, it's getting to the fun part. All right, looks like we've got 2 hats, but this is what makes it reversible. So right sides together, We're going to put one inside the other, just like this. And we want our seams to line up. So we're going to start with the end one here. And you can use clips for this or pins, whatever. As long as your seams are lining up. You're not going to pin the seams on the inside. In fact, it's just floating on the inside. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to sew all the way around the perimeter, but I'm going to put something very obvious, like my big star pins here. And we're going to leave about a 4 or 5 inch opening so that we can turn it right sides out. So I'm not going to sew over this part here. It's going to signal me. The rest is all going to be, I'll just clip it. That way I know when I hit the pins, don't sew over it. Seems like it's the kind of thing one would remember. So many times I've sewn over it. So this should lay relatively flat together. The wrinkles can all kind of go up into the hat. And you don't need tons and tons like before. You just need enough that it's going to stay flush together. And we may as well start at 1 star. And again, 1/4 inch seam all the way around that edge. And back stitch. And you can kind of go normal sewing speed here, whatever you're comfortable with. As long as you're not curling up your seams, keeping the seams flat. And the smoother you can make your sewing, the more round your brim will be. You won't have any little like poking out parts. So it's better to go a little slower but stay going. And I'm just guiding it in. It's surprising how well the feed dogs do to help you with the rounding. All right, I'm getting to a star. So I'm just going to back stitch here. And now, before we turn it right side out, we do want to try to open the seams as best we can. It's going to help when we're on the inside and wanting it to lay really flat for our top stitching. It doesn't have to be perfectly ironed flat. Now we can turn it right side out. This is the fun part. All right. Yay! And just with your finger, go along all of the edges, try to open them up, push them apart as much as you can, push them out. Get it so that it looks like a regular hat. We'll still have a bit of like fluffing work to do here. What you want to start doing is grabbing both sides and with your finger and your thumb sort of rolling it to get that seam to come all the way out. But you want it really out as far as it can go. If you're not able to get it to poke right out, put your hand on the inside and push it right along. But you will still need to do this sort of rolling action. If you have a pair of quilting gloves that are sticky, that might save you a little bit of cramping. All right, so basically you want to be able to see like both sides fairly. Now it still looks like kind of puffy. See, like, but you can see the other side here. So the seam is out. So we're going to take it to the ironing board and press down this seam. And it'll lay nice and flat now. Don't worry about the opening quite yet. Get the other stuff all down first. If you find the under fabric starting to roll up, just take your fingers and roll it back under. I'm just going to add, I'm steaming inside here. Just pushing my steam button, get it a little hot in there. Just kind of roll it around a little bit. Try not to put any wrinkles into it. I'm mostly worried about flattening out the brim. Your head is going to naturally flatten out the top. With the opening, you can kind of just fold that right underneath. Give it a little press. And then same with the top. Just fold it under and meet it up. And now here we want to use some clips. I like clips because it kind of flattens the seams better than pins in this case. And now what we're going to do is top stitch right around the edge of the hat, like right around this edge. So now you can use your 1/4 inch foot here, but if your machine has an edge foot or a G foot, I'm going to suggest that you use it now. So I'm going to take off the 1/4 inch, put on the G foot, and I'm just going to line up the edge of that foot. See how there's a gate in the middle of this foot? And that's going to let me sew right along that edge. Now, I need to move my needle over. So you can do that manually just by adjusting your stitch over, and you can check to see if it will drop down, and we want it to drop just on the edge. So I've moved my needle over so it doesn't hit the foot, but there's not much space either. I've got it at a 1.9. And I'm going to start stitching. I'm just going to go a little slow to start. Make sure it's staying on the edge. And just keep your eye on the front little fence and then kind of back and forth to the needle to make sure it's feeding in exactly against that little edge. And this is going to allow you to perfectly sew on the very, very tight edge of your hat. And you can see all of our seams are lined up because we made sure to follow that as we were constructing it. That's going to keep everything nice and neat in the finished hat. And here's where you'll see if your back fabric has rolled over just a wee too much. Don't let it go past there. Okay, so I'm coming around to my clip and my first opening. Make sure you keep your clip on right to before, because we don't want that peeking out. And now we're meeting up with our other where we started. I'm just going to back stitch a few, go forward. Okay. That's it. Our hat is basically done, and now it's totally up to you if you want to do anything else to it, but it's totally secure. It's ready to wear. It's cute, right? Yeah, I like it. It's comfortable, and it's got a wide enough brim, and because we've added the stabilizer, it's not too floppy, and you can see any little inconsistency kind of makes its way into the hat, and you just leave the top seams undone. Now, if you want to go a step further, let's say you're making this one day out of a solid. You could put a little trim of ribbon inside here so it sticks out. You could even, lots of sewing machines have great decorative stitches. You could switch to your F foot, and after you've done this top stitching around the very edge, you could put a whole row of decorative stitches around your hat. Lots of machines have all kinds of decorative stitches. You can see, some that really lend themselves to the hat in the summer, like the little leaves, some of the plants, the little flowers, any of these kind of vines. There's some little tulips. You could even just go ahead and do another row of top stitching. So I'm just going to put the 1/4 inch foot back on. This is just going to stabilize the brim a little bit more. So I've got my 1/4 inch foot on, and you could just do a second row of stitches there. I'm going to go over to the 1/4 inch. And no pins or anything here, because really this is just a row of decorative stitches. And if you want, just make sure you're increasing your stitch length. And this is just an extra row. It's going to keep the edge a little flatter. even though there's no chance of it rolling because it has that first line, this just keeps it that much flatter. You could do 3 rows for that matter. You know, do this one at a 1/4 inch and then you could do a 3rd row at a 1/2 inch. If you had a twin needle and you wanted to do this all together, I guess you could do that too. This is just as easy. All right, I'm getting to my other row. I want to make sure everything's going to line up. Yep, and back stitch a little. There we go. And now I've just got like a double row of stitches, perfectly spaced apart, just for a little extra stability. In fact, you could keep going up and really make the brim of your hat even stiffer just by evenly spacing out the stitches and going all the way up to the seam. Totally up to you. So that's your sun hat. I hope you wear it with pride this season. And remember, it's reversible, so you can wear it any way you like. And this is just quilting cotton, so if it gets sweaty or dirty, just throw it in the wash. Now, you may want to give it an iron after it comes out of the dryer, or just let it hang dry. Quilting cotton tends to get a little wrinkled. I'm virtually certain anyone that sees you wearing this is going to say, hey, nice hat, where'd you get it? And you're going to be able to say, I made it myself. And then you'll probably be making them one. Thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you've been inspired to make your sun hat.